Howdy folks, welcome to part 2 of our riding mower service videos here. Part 1 we went over the oil change, lubrication and general inspection of the machine. Part 2 is going to be dedicated to the cutting deck. And out of anything on the machine, this unfortunately is what sees the most wear and tear. And to properly inspect it and service it, yeah, you have to remove it. Now, I'm not going to blow any sunshine here. Removing the mower deck on these things is my least favorite job of servicing a riding mower. I've done a number over the years, and they're all pretty much the same. They're suspended on hangers, and to get them out, you support the weight of the deck with wooden blocks. You lower it to take the weight off of the hangers, then you can pull the hangers out and pull the deck out. It's a rather heavy piece of stamped steel, so it's awkward to work with, but it's a necessary evil, unfortunately, that is required as part of the maintenance schedule on these things. So let's get to it. As in part 1, one of the most important pieces of service equipment you can have when you're servicing your riding mower is your owner's or operating manual, because it'll tell you exactly what has to be removed. Again, these are all similar, but there's going to be slight changes in the way the hangers are configured, the way they're attached, and your manual will point all that out. As I also had mentioned, you have to support the weight of the deck on wood blocks. Now, I've got 3 of them. I place them kind of in a tripod configuration, 2 on the back and 1 at the front, basically in the same location roughly as where the hanger points are. And I've got mine all cut to the same exact length, and that's so I can also adjust the level of the deck. And again, your manual should show you that, but we'll go over that really quickly when we're putting it back together. Just showing the block location real quick. There's the one on the left side, the one on the right side, and then the one right under the center. We'll just lower the deck until all the weight is supported by the wood. This is showing up okay, but with all the weight off the deck, your hangers are going to be loose. There's not going to be any weight on them. So on this particular machine, there's just a clip to pull out, and then the hanger will come off like so. And these are notorious for squeaking, so when you put it back together, grease all these pivot points up where it hangs so it doesn't squeak. Same thing where this attaches to the deck itself. So that's the hanger. Now there's also a swing arm here, again with another clip that you pull out, and that will just come off as well. So this is the left side. We'll do the right side. Same exact thing on the right side. Clip. Hanger's loose because all the weight is supported by the blocks. And then the front swing arm. Clip. And the swing arm comes off. Now we've just got the front one to do. So this is the front of the deck. Again, there's another little clip here. And a washer. Just make sure if there's washers or spacers, keep note of where they go when you put it back together, and then the hanger arm comes off. And I should also note, here's another area that squeaks, that drives me nuts if it's not lubricated. This hanger arm, both where it's attached at the front of the deck, of the cutting deck, and also in this little bracket up here. If you don't lube that, this can squeak. And then the only other thing on here that we have to remove at this point is the belt off of the drive pulley. And then there's only one other thing. Let me just move the camera quickly over to here. Hopefully we can see this. This is the cable that tensions for the belt tensioner to engage the cutting belt, and it has to be pulled out as well. Just a little clippy, and it will pull back. And then there's a spring here, just goes in the tensioner arm. It's just got one of those, oops, it's got a little, the little L hook in it. Hopefully that's showing up. Just
comes out of the arm. So we've got to get that cable out of there as well. So now that that's out, we should be able to slide. There we go. Should be able to slide the deck out.
This will be mower dependent, but I always slide it out on this side, the left side of the mower. More of the deck is exposed out this side, just easier to access it. And same for when we slide it back in. It will be going in that way as well. You could take the wood blocks out if you wanted to, but just slide it out. As I had mentioned in the first video, I always like using my leaf blower to blow all the crap out of this. If you wash it, it's even messier than just having a bunch of grass in there. Wet grass is miserable to work around, so keep it dry if you don't have a leaf blower and just vacuum it out when you get it out to get most of the crap off of it. Again, every deck is going to be different, so I'm just going to show you a few things to inspect, but if you've got one of these John Deere 100 series, this is the 42-inch deck, obviously everything would be applicable that I'll show you here on yours. So first thing is, of course, the belt. This belt is 7 years old. This is its 7th summer, and it's starting to get worn. And most of this actually happened during a service a couple of years ago. I didn't have it over one of these pulleys correctly, and it got chewed up the first time I tried to engage it. Otherwise, this belt would probably still be in great shape. So belts do not wear out often if, you know, they're not rubbing on something. And that's the first thing to suspect. If you're breaking belts, check over the entire belt system. You know, check the pulleys are nice and free, they're not wobbling. I worked in a power equipment service center for one summer, and at least once a week we'd have a bitching customer come in. They'd buy a new belt because theirs broke. They'd put the new belt on and it would fail within an hour or so. And I can guarantee you every time it happened, it was because something was hung up or they didn't have the belt installed correctly. I've never seen a belt prematurely fail. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but double check all your pulleys to make sure there's nothing, you know, they're spinning nice and free, the bearings are buttery smooth, there's no play or no wobble in them. So that's the first thing to check. So we're going to be replacing the belt, obviously. You have to pull these covers off on this machine to also lubricate the spindles, which you will get to. These are brakes, and you'll see this is the tensioning arm. So that little tensioning cable, it hooks up to a little hole in there. Make sure you grease that. Also grease your pivot points so nothing squeaks. But when you pull on, when you engage the PTO they call it, it just tensions this, so it increases the length, and that's what tensions it on the drive pulley. But at the same time, it's pulling these brakes away. These are just little brake shoes from the pulley. Now these work to an extent, but your instructions will show how to check it. They want a little bit of free play in these nuts here, but essentially as soon as you pull this, those brakes should release. So check all that. Lubricate what can be lubricated on here. The pivot points, again, I use that spray lithium grease to, you know, just move everything, see where all the pivot points are, grease everything up. I'll just do one here. Anything, wherever it pivots, you know, I'll put some grease in there. I'll put some in that hole, put some around there, some underneath as well. Don't get any on the belt. I'm changing this belt, so it's not going to matter. But hopefully that gives you a general idea. These bearings are sealed. There's really nothing you can do with them, but these ones we can grease. And I'm going to show you something else, which is kind of interesting. But I've got to take these two pulley covers off first. So I'm just using a hand crank to get these off. And yours may have two bolts. May not even have covers, may have a cage, may have like a horseshoe or something across it. These are not the best. If you don't have them lined up right, the belt will rub right through them. If you don't have to replace the belt, you don't have to take it off to do any of the servicing or inspections or when we flip it up to get the blades off to check them. But do make a note of it just in case it pops off and you don't have a manual that shows you the routing. So just, take a note of how it's routed. If you do have to replace it, of course, again, every machine is going to be different. This one, it's quite simple. It pops off the 2 blade spindle pulleys, no problem. It will pass by this idler pulley here, no problem, but it won't come off of this one, the little keeper bracket or whatever they call it. Yeah, there's just not enough room, so if you run into that, you're probably going to have to take the pulley out. You may not have to take it right out. I think we can just slide this one right up to get enough clearance to take the belt off. There we go. And of course now, if you wanted to check your pulleys at this point, you wanted to check the bearings in them, they are a sealed bearing. There's not really any way to get grease into them. I can tell there's still grease in there. There's no play, but these are often sold in service kits. You'll get your 2 idler pulleys because there's no way to replace the bearings in them. The 2 halves of the pulley are spot welded with the bearing in the center, so there's no way to get it out. You don't have to take this off to do what I'm going to show you, but there's a grease zerk on this spindle and one on the other side, of course, which you can get to from underneath. But I just wanted to show you a couple of things. I found this out on a friend's Husqvarna mower I had done it several years back. He's got grease zerks on the spindles, really makes it easy. You don't have to take anything off. They actually stick right through the top of the surround, the housing around here. So you can easily grease them, but it turned out I wasn't even greasing the bearings. I'm going to show you why that is. Anyways, there's the grease zerk. I just thought it was on his Husqvarna, but when I took mine off after I did his, same exact thing, and it's unbelievable, really. So if you remove one of these spindle housings, or whatever you want to call it, from your mower deck, there's not much to them. Again, there's the grease zerk on it. Here's the spindle shaft that went through it. The mower blade goes on the bottom here. Shaft goes through it. Then this is tapped on the top, and of course then the pulley was on top of here. But what I wanted to show you is, of course, okay, so you're injecting grease in there, you're thinking, well, you're lubricating the bearings, right? And, as you can see, there's a bearing on the top, and there's one at the bottom. Spacer shaft in the center. So we don't need to see that anymore. So what we're looking at is the bearings. So that makes sense, right? You've got bearings that are sealed on one side, not on the other. You inject grease in the spindle housing, and grease will get into the bearing. However, on this one, and like I said, I first discovered this on my buddy's Husqvarna, they actually came with with a sealed bearing, like a 2RS bearing in there. So it was largely sealed, and all you do is you just get a screwdriver, or an awl or something in the seal and pop it off. You can easily pop these seals out. So yeah, you just take the bearing out of the housing and pop the seal out on one side. So when you grease it up, the grease is actually getting into the bearing. Now again, do you have to do that? Some grease is going to get by that seal, but not as much as I would like to see. And I just think it's really poor workmanship that whoever puts these together, they either don't spec the right bearing for it, or they just don't pull the seal out. No big deal to do it. If you do take your spindle housing out to pull the shaft to check the bearings to see if they've got that inner seal, when you're putting it back in, just make sure to use Loctite on the threads that hold the housing in, because you don't want these things coming out. With the top side checks all done, now we look at the bottom side. And I usually just prop it against my toolbox or whatever, just to have it upright so you can get to everything. And there's not much to inspect here other than the blades themselves. And yeah, if you've got a bunch of grass clippings stuck in the deck, you can remove all that. But we're going to zoom in on one of the blades. You want to check the cutting edge of the blade. There's actually nothing wrong with both of these cutting edges on both blades. But I'm going to take the one blade off just to show you how I sharpen it. I just find using impact is the quickest way to get these off. And the washer on here, it's actually cupped. It's domed, so it's sprung. So when you put it on, make sure you get that cup side facing the blade, so as you tighten the bolt down, that washer is actually providing spring force outward on the nut so it doesn't loosen up. And most of these, they've got little splines in them like this so they don't slip on the shaft. As you can see, this silver stuff, that's just anti-seize compound. I put anti-seize compound on the shafts so the bolts don't rust on. And here you can get a better look at the blade. And you know, there's nothing really wrong with this. There's no big rock chunks missing out of either side. So there's really nothing wrong with this blade. But we'll sharpen it just to show you how I do that. So to sharpen blades, I usually just use my little angle air grinder with a 2-inch grinding wheel on it. These are made by 3M, but you can find them online. Just look for 2-inch wheels. You can use a hand file, you can use a bench grinder, whatever, an angle grinder, whatever works. I like these because they don't remove much material, and if you don't have any big stones or anything to get out of here, yeah, it's fine. So kind of just look at the profile of the bevel of the cut. Most of the blades, there'll be about a 45-degree bevel on them, and you just follow that. And you don't go on the back side. I will when I'm done just to clean up any burrs, but you know, I'll just go along. And then any burrs on the back side, again, I'll have the top of the disc rotating away from the blade. You don't want the disc rotating into the blade because then it'll catch. So you want the rotation of the disc away from the blade. And I'm just going flat here, as flat on the surface as possible. Just basically to remove any burrs that were created when I was doing this edge. But you know, that's kind of what we're looking at. Again, this blade was not bad at all. It didn't even need to be done. So we'll just do the other edge to make sure we don't change the balance of the blade. And yeah, might be able to shave with that. Now we'll check the balance. So there's many different ways to check balance of mower blades. It can be as simple as just putting them on a nail to see if they move, and that's going to give you a course adjustment. There's those little stepped cone things that rest on a pin. They're really good. I just use my RC helicopter balancer for the same balancer I use for my rotor heads. You know, if I can balance an RC helicopter rotor head and blades, yeah, you're going to get it really close with this. And as we can see, it's fairly level. If it was dipped down on either side, you'd want to take. So if it was dipped down on this side more, that means this side would be a little bit heavier. So you'd file or grind a little bit more of that edge down, and it will come back. And just to show you how. Here's just a really light piece of paper, and if I put it on the end here of this blade, you'll see it pivot down there. So yeah, so this gets it really, really balanced, but you certainly don't need anything like that. Just showing it for any RC helicopter people who subscribe to my channel who watch this. If you want to use your high point balancer for your rotor heads on this, go ahead, they work great. Finishing up underneath, so blades are sharpened, torqued back up. I just put them on again with a impact. If you don't have an impact, there's generally various holes throughout the deck for screws or whatnot that were never used. and you can just put a screwdriver or something in there, you know, and brace the blade with the screwdriver as you're loosening or torquing up the spindle bolts. I just took all the loose grass shavings off with a scraper, and if you notice lots of rust, really it's just surface rust, it's not deep, but I just I use this Bow Shield T9, really good stuff. Once the carrier flashes off, it leaves a wax coating, and I like putting this under the deck, and it lasts quite a while. We have to get the belt on, and then we'll get it back under the machine. We've got our replacement belt. This is an aftermarket one. The GX 272 John Deere belt is about 60 bucks here in Canada. These things are 30, so half the price. If you've still got your old belt though, and it's still intact, definitely keep it, just in case the new one busts. You know, you've got this as a backup. And of course, before you do anything, just make sure the lengths are the same, and it looks like the same, same thickness and everything. New belt is on and routed. Got the pulley nuts tightened again. Just double check, make sure everything's tight. You know, there's nothing binding. Everything's routed correctly. Get the spindle pulley covers or gauges, whatever you've got back on, and we'll get it back under the machine. We just slide the deck back under the machine in approximately the same location and put the 3 blocks back under to raise it up. Installation is pretty much reverse order. We've got everything buttoned back up down here. So there's our front hanger on. We've got the belt on. Make sure it's in the guides, and make sure nothing has come off under the deck on the pulleys. Tension it, make sure there's tension. And when you first go to use it the first time, just slowly put your tensioner on, or the PTO. Let that belt slowly start turning, and then you'll know if it pops off a pulley, you'll know right away before you destroy the belt. Just go really slow. And same with the back here. We've got the back adjustments back on. Putting this cable back in and getting that spring on the tensioner arm is a little bit of a fun time. Just take your time. There should be a little slack in here, not too much. I could probably tighten this a little bit. On this one, to tighten it, you just loosen these 2 bolts and slide this bracket back. Now, as far as height adjustment goes, you know, every machine might have different ways to do this. The way I do it is I set the blocks underneath, and on this specific one, it wants 1/8 to 1/4 inch lower than the back. So there's a slight forward tilt to the deck, and it says that's what gives the best cut. So what I do is I lower the deck until it touches the 2-inch block at the front, and I've got about a 1/4 inch space on this side and also on the other side. If this was a lot higher on this side than the other, then you adjust this nut right here to raise or lower this side of the deck. Same with the other side. And on the front, if you need to raise the front or lower it, there's a nut on the front of this hanger. As you turn the nut in, it pulls this hanger in and pulls the front of the deck up. So that wraps up our fairly full service on the riding mower. Again, I'll link to part 1 below in the description if you missed it, or up in the card doodad for the oil change maintenance type stuff. But hopefully this part 2 helped you out if and when you have to remove your deck for inspection and servicing it. And don't forget about those funny spindle bearings. Actually, I'd like comments. If anyone pulls their mower apart, like to know brand and model, if their bearings are sealed on the inside like this one and the Husqvarna I did. It'd be interesting to know if that's a fairly common practice in the industry, which is absolutely absurd. Cheers folks, have a good one.